Hey there, I'm Sharon Welch, and welcome to A Brave Journey, the podcast to help you throw out those legacy belief and identity stories that you've been lugging around on autopilot for decades, so you can jump back in the driver's seat of your aliveness again. When you change your mind, you change your life. Are you ready? Let's get into it. It'll be fun. I recently had the distinct pleasure and fun to get to chat with Jordan Campbell, founder of Jordan Campbell Creative, as well as the blog Global Debauchery. Who doesn't love a title like that? This is a woman in her 40s who has been on a journey to reinvent herself after coming out of a largely corporate environment. We had the hit parade of topics. We hit them all. The limiting stories we tell ourselves, the detox from corporate culture, the beliefs and supposed signals of success and happiness that we blindly carry around as truth that may not actually be true for us. How building the skills to honor your own boundaries is everything, and that your productivity does not equal your worth. So many great things, culminating with the fact that if we can embrace our weirdness and our quirks rather than hide them away from each other, that's the way that we find our tribe of support and acceptance, and how we can really experience a higher level of happiness, even having to go through the fear and discomfort of living authentically, rather than continuing to live incongruently in our comfort zones. So many great things in this podcast. I hope you'll listen to the whole thing. I would love to hear what you think. And if you are a woman on your own journey to brave, we want to get you on this show as well. Enjoy. Okay, I am very excited to have with me today Jordan Campbell, who is not only the founder of Jordan Campbell Creative, but is the genius behind Global Debauchery, which has got to be the coolest name for a blog that I've ever heard. You are on this journey now, your own brave journey, having left the corporate world as a creative director for something like 20 years. So tell me a little bit about how you want the world to know you now, and let's talk about how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, I would like the world to know me now as, an expert in travel and all things travel, specifically offbeat travel with tasty libations, hence global debauchery. And I would like them to think of me as, a great creative mind in sort of the space of content creation now. That space, obviously, as we know, is filled with a lot of very young people. And, there aren't many folks that are 40 and up that are really in that space. And, I kind of just want to be there as a person who is a little bit older, offering like their completely authentic selves. I've tried to implement things like, I don't know, it's like Last Call, a roundup of just like brutally honest reviews of the place that I just went, and people love them. It is sort of no holds barred. And I'm actually with that because, freelancers and content creators usually have multiple revenue streams. I'm actually launching courses that are geared towards creators or entrepreneurs or other freelancers, all about optimizing websites, how to brand yourself, how to market yourself better. So while I've basically taken my 25-year career in the creative industry and am sort of incorporating the two to carve another niche in the space for myself.
I love that. I love
Yeah. It's a lot of work getting this up and launched, but it'll be fine. It's fine. everything.
How
fine.
often do we have that mantra for ourselves? It's fine. Everything's fine. It's all fine.
Everything is fine.
I think you're right too, that it's not particularly unusual for people as we, creep up on or blast through midlife to be in that phase, number one. And number two, to walk away from multiple decades long career, even if it's in a similar vein. I still think that's pretty unusual. Walk me through how you got there. How did you decide that that's what you wanted to do?
When I started out, I've always been very much an overachiever. I'm a military brat. I graduated at the top of my class, high school. I got scholarships to one of the best design schools, actually in the world, and graduated at the top of my class there.
Wow.
I, you know, the gold standard at the time when I graduated, especially in the creative field, was to work in advertising at an advertising agency. And at that time, it really felt like I had all the energy in the world. I worked hard, I play hard. I was kind of proud of managing the two, sometimes not always very well in our 20s.
Right.
but I kind of was like very much that attitude, and that's super acceptable. I gradually started moving up the chain, when I eventually moved to the DC area and began working. I worked at University of Maryland for more than 10 years and then moved into the nonprofit space in downtown DC and started moving my way up the ladder there. And it did not get, obviously the higher up the chain you get, the more responsibilities you have, the less work-life balance you have. I did work with a lot of really cool clients and on a lot of really cool projects, like building massive websites and whole campaigns, award-winning stuff. And I loved my team, but around 30, I started struggling with migraines often. And it would sort of come to pass that I had an autoimmune, and chronic migraine was a symptom of my autoimmune. And I very much was trying to just getting in this place where sometimes working 60, 80 hours a week, even on projects. And my life literally became getting well enough just to go back into work and then working through the weekends or sleeping through the weekends and having zero time to myself. Like the idea of self-care and dieting and just exercise, when you're working that many hours, you literally wake up and start working, and you work until 10 o'clock at night and go to bed. And a lot of it in the creative industry is 110 miles an hour the whole time you're there. It's not like a leisurely sort of job. I got to, with University of Maryland, I eventually moved to another organization. And I'd been at Maryland for a really long time. And we had a lot of folks, government workers that are lifers,
Yeah.
And I was like, well, now's the time, or I'm a lifer, and I was like, I think I'm going to move on and see what else is out there. And 3 weeks later, I came home crying hysterically because I was basically like, what have I done?
Yeah.
Like, what have I done? I left they were negotiating to keep me. They had multiple conversations, and I was like, no, I think my time here is done. And I was very confident about it. And they were offering me a lot more money at the golden handcuffs, and I got there. It's almost immediately, I was like, this is really toxic. And I stuck it out for 3 years where I was just, I was miserable physically. I was miserable emotionally. And you can only sustain that for so long. And that's when I started speaking to my husband about possibly taking my skills and freelancing. And, at the time, it's kind of funny, the progression. So it started out where he's like, well, I think you should maybe like look for another job while you're doing this. And I'm like, I don't think I have time to look for another job. Looking for a job is a full-time job.
Right.
And I don't have time for a life. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to do that. And then it moved to like, I don't know how. I don't even know if I want to go work for somebody else, And then it went into, I don't even have time for a side hustle. And then it went into like, I'm just going to resign and I'm going to start afterwards when I can focus my energies. And I did. Fortunately, he was really, really supportive of that. I did I think I gave myself 3 months off of just downtime.
Yeah.
And made a major house renovation. It wasn't really 3 months off. It was a whole house renovation during that time. But I started picking clients up, like people came to me. So it was great to sort of kick that off and know that my previous efforts had been valued.
We talk a lot in this podcast about some of the self-talk, some of the conversations that go on inside our head that keeps us in places where we're not necessarily comfortable for a lot of motivations, right? Acceptance or the good girl, or this is what I have to do to be successful. And then we've also talked a lot about systems that are put in place that are actually designed to keep us right where we are rather than allowing us to be fully expressed humans. I'm curious, and I've certainly talked about, my experience coming out of corporate as well, but what were the kinds of things that you thought about that you were either telling yourself or that you were hearing maybe from your husband or your coworkers or your family that kept you in a role where you were struggling with work-life balance, where you were feeling burned out and frustrated, crying and doing all these things? Like, what were the things while you were in there that were keeping you there?
So I think actually this feels like an interesting point in time because like Gen X or not Gen X, sorry, Gen Z and Gen A have entirely different perspectives on life. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of changes. I think COVID changed sort of the face of the workplace. And I find it interesting that a lot of companies are still fighting, like, you need to come into the office, you need to come into the office for some unknown reason to me. Like, if you like going into the office because you're a person who needs to get out of your house, or that, like, go do you.
Yeah.
Sort of insisting that everyone else needs to come into the office as well, I feel is like really, I don't know. But I will say, like, with this sort of new way of thinking, a lot of things I've kind of latched onto. So I was very much raised, again, military household.
Yep.
If you're going to do it right. And actually, that was followed by a damn it. If you're going to do it right, damn it. That was always
Exactly.
and if you're not going to do it like 100%, don't bother. I'm trying to think of some. It was very just hard nosed, strong work ethic, above and beyond, like overachiever. And for a long time, I was really happy with that with myself. I was like, oh, well, I was doing all of those things. I don't know that I was really happy. But
you were
now,
doing what you were supposed to be doing. This is what we're all
right,
told that we should be doing. We're like, I'm killing it.
right. And in my head, I'd always been like, and everything was always next level too. You're never satisfied, right? Like at first it was like, oh, I'm going to go to college. Okay. Like I'm going to graduate at the top of my class. Then you graduate and you're like, I want to go work in advertising, like the premier, like crazy, insane sort of workplace to work. And then I did that. And then I was like, oh, when I came to Maryland, I was like, I'm going to be like a director. And I'm also going to go get my master's while I'm working full time. So I went and did that. And then I went to the next
We were
place.
leading parallel lives, I can just tell you, right?
And then the next place, my team grew 3 or 4 times the size of the prior place.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're never satisfied. And to the money thing, for a long time, I was like, I'm going to break 6 figures.
Totally.
And then you do that, and you're just like, like you have these very arbitrary kind of goals.
Yeah.
And then I started getting into the place where I was so burned out, so unhappy. It did when I resigned. It did take me a really long time within myself to get comfortable that I had made the decision that I made. I felt like, my husband's been nothing but supportive. However, the slightest thing would make me really sort of paranoid, and like I would be like, oh my gosh, he thinks this about me. Oh my gosh, my dad thinks this about me. The whole world, like a lot of people are going like, what did she, this 40 something quit her, very successful job to become an influencer on Instagram,
Right?
And I was,
Exactly.
yeah. So it took a really long time convincing even myself that like I had made the right decision. And now I think more things of there, there's a lot of generational sort of sayings and mindsets pounded into your brain. And it's funny because now I look at it and I'm like, always telling myself, I'm like, progress, not perfection, like this is
Right. Yeah.
and somebody actually said to me that I was like, this is totally true. I told her about that. If you're going to do it right, damn it. And she's like, that's like saying that if you want to run a marathon, you need to run it that day. Like training for a mile to start is not good enough, And I was like, it wasn't to my dad, I was like, it was not. You had to be in peak performance all the time.
We make an interesting point too about a lot of times, even if we have the support around us, you said your spouse is very supportive and we get in our own way because we can't believe that it's at all possible that this decision that we just made, which we know on some level was the right one. So there's all the regular scary reasons, like we get used to the paycheck, we get used to climbing the ladder. I talked a little while back about how this idea of when is enough and figuring out what that is for yourself, because, in the corporate world, you get the next job or the next raise or the next cool project. And you think, oh, that's going to be the thing that makes it all worth it. And then you get there and you're like, and then what? Like it never ends. So there's that hamster wheel. So you make an interesting point that you get to this decision, you've made it, but then you're still doubting yourself and you're telling a story about everyone around you, assuming that then they're judging you based on those things that you just rejected.
Yeah, it's a lot of projecting.
Yeah.
I will say too, like I am just an example. I talk about how hard-nosed my dad was, but we were very close.
Yeah.
I was, my father's daughter, like we did everything together. He was my buddy. So while he was very demanding and strict about a lot of that stuff, a lot of it was heavily rewarded also. So, but I don't know. I know now that and this is sort of one of the last things I'm kind of letting go of is that your productivity does not equal your worth.
Correct. Amen. Yes.
Like, and this is because now that I guess the difference between then and now. So my blog had always been a hobby blog for a really long time. And the idea was I'm going to freelance and keep myself afloat and keep income with my creative skills.
Yep.
And the bonus is I can fire clients at will if I want to, or I can work the hours that I want to work. And I'm going to spend the rest of my time working on this other platform, this other channel that I have available to me. I have learned maybe a little idealistic, freelance hours don't always sort of coincide with exactly what you need.
True.
You might get, when it rains, it pours, and it's not your clients. They shouldn't, to be fair, have to care about all the other clients that you have and what's going on in the rest of your life. You're hired to do a job for them to complete this, and that's what you do. But also on top of that, so that often happens, or a whole bunch of things come in all at the same time. The other thing that happens is owning your own business is not for the weak, the faint-hearted.
No.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And actually, the more my channel grows, I started hiring out my own team and investing in bigger projects. And a lot of those take time, and
owning your own business really is an exercise exactly in, when you work for someone else, it's really easy to not have to take, responsibility for a lot of things. You can explain a lot of things away. And so when you run your own business, all of a sudden everything stops with you. And so not only in your business is it, all your responsibility, but I think it's also a good exercise in as you look at how you show up in the world and the decisions that you're making to be authentic or not. It all comes back down to you. There is no one else to point to when you're finally making those decisions. And that can be scary too.
Yeah, I do think I will say, so my hours haven't necessarily reduced between the two. However, I am 1000% happier. It did take me a while to get to that point. And it also took me a while to start building income from this new path, not just I had income from my creative freelance work, no problem. I had contacts up the wazoo, and people were just coming to me and like I actually did not have to go and sort of hustle for contacts or new work. I have too much. Like I have referred many a client to former employees of mine and just like, here, take it. Like I don't have the time, and they couldn't be more grateful. And I'm like, oh, I don't, absolutely not. But and it also took a while for my blog platform to start generating some income. And lately we're really on the up and up with a bunch of different metrics. And I finally feel like, it's happening. It's finally happening. And I do, to be fair, I feel, well, particularly in the world of content creation and influencers, you see a lot of people jump on and, I think they might have accounts for like a year and they're like, nobody's following me. And I'm like, it's like if I was having a personal conversation with them, I would be like, it is like any other career, like I started my design career making $18,000 a year. And
Right. Yeah,
I
exactly.
worked with a horrible postage stamp sized studio apartment that literally had a pop-up bathroom. Like I didn't even, so I'm like, you start out the same way. And if you just don't have that persistence to just keep going, and taking things to the next level, and the humility to kind of like reassess and just be like, okay, that was a complete flop, but
Yeah.
moving on.
Well, yeah. And I think the timeline too, I think that's something, whether you're changing careers or doing something different in your life or just making some kind of change, I think we all have this expectation to a certain extent that I have decided and now it shall be. And so we sort of decide, we think we know the timeline. And when it doesn't happen on that timeline, then we think we've done it wrong or we should stop doing it. I mean, I think it's another one of those self-talk things that we do. And things take the time that it takes. And we sort of, our ego always wants to feel like it's in control of the universe. And so our ego's telling us, yeah, but it didn't happen. You said you were going to do this in 6 months and it's now been a year. So clearly you were a failure. And, so yeah, I think it's really hard. Were there a couple of things as you transition, you talked a little bit about how in the beginning it was difficult to really trust yourself. What were the top sort of self-talk things that you battled with that you had to get through till you finally felt like you were at least on a groove, you were on a path to what you really envisioned going on your own?
I think I have done a lot of, I think some of the self-talk was realizing that productivity does not equal worth.
Yeah.
That was a big one. I think another big one was the idea that, again, perfection, not progress. That was the second one. And I think a third one, to be honest, and this is all on me, it has nothing to do with the rest of the universe, but I do have flare ups. I have autoimmune flare ups. For somebody in my brain who is like, go, 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 I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. Like I have all these ideas. There's just not enough time in a day. And also, when you have an autoimmune, not enough energy in the world, to keep you
Mm,
going. So I have periodically had flare-ups that kind of stop me in my tracks. Like everything has to shut down. And that's when you really start sort of reassessing how much you're doing and if there are ways that you can, sort of pull some things back. You're kind of like rejudging and remanaging your schedule and how you were thinking of it before.
yeah.
Um, and I'll tell you, the flare-ups are the worst for somebody who's highly productive because you can't do anything but lay there and like take medicine. You're so exhausted and all you can think about is all of the things that you have to do like the whole time. And then, you know, emailing people that you're out that you can't, and just the level of guilt is terrible. And seeing the emails pile up in your inbox, it's,
Uh, yeah.
it's a form of torture.
Yeah.
It really is. But I think after
But
I
what a great lesson though, right? I mean, I would imagine that, it's unfortunate that you have to experience those physical challenges, but I would guess that as you see that happen and you have to take those breaks and you see the things piling up and you realize you did not die, that you're like, okay, I can maybe put that in a better perspective. And I think a lot of people don't really have I don't want to consider autoimmune issues an opportunity, but they don't necessarily have the opportunity to be faced with that reality that says, these things that we are doing, we can do at our own pace. These things that we are doing are going to get done when they get done, and it's all okay.
yeah,
You know?
the world is going to keep moving.
Yeah,
Plus, there's nothing. I mean, everyone loves to think that their project is like the most important thing in the world.
sure.
I literally just am moving out of the worst flare up. I got very, very sick for 6 weeks,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
and actually had experience. I guess on week 5, my neurologist informed me that I actually had brain swelling from like a massive,
Hmm.
and you know how it is getting into these, like nobody knows what's going on. And then they're
Right.
trying to see this other specialist and this other specialist. And if you don't have one, it's going to be like 3 months,
With no answer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So 5 weeks down the road, and I was still sort of bedridden. They were basically like, you had brain swelling from a significant, like, infectious autoimmune event. And so it really was like, at that point, I'm like, I never, want to feel as bad as I did for that long. And now is actually, I think for the first time, I always say like, oh, I'm going to get better about, how I'm spending my time. I'm going to get more sleep, get more exercise. I'm going to lose some weight. And then you just go back to life as it was. I
Right.
think this time I actually did feel clients were very frustrated with me. And I actually started getting angry because I was like, I always push myself. I come back too early and
Hmm.
seem to think that I'm ready to just hit the ground running, and I'm like, no, I'm going to come back, answer some emails, and then I'm going to go sleep for another 10 hours. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
like my body was just done. My body was done. There was absolutely, and I started getting angry that some folks I think just maybe underestimated, how
Well,
significant.
yeah. And I think also, I've had this conversation before that I think we also have taught people how we show up in the world. We've taught people how to treat us. And so if we come from a history of being the caretaker or being the person with all the answers or being the person who gets stuff done against all odds, we've created an expectation the people around us that that's what they're going to get, even though we were killing ourselves,
Mhm.
even though we were, not having the kind of balance or authenticity we want to have. And so when we have an event like that, or something that causes us to pause and we get that kind of reaction, then it's sort of that self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, it's like, see what happens when I don't control the universe?
Yep. I mean, no, 100%. I
Yeah.
actually this time was like, things I do to myself is it's part of my personality, but it is also a bit of a defense mechanism, like a defense mechanism that I do in many instances use humor and sarcasm to kind of brush over things that
Sure.
aren't really that funny. Mostly and very self-deprecating. You know what I mean? When it comes to me and my stuff. So people will be like, "Oh, how are you?" And I'm like, "Hanging in there. Like, it's good. It's a dumpster fire, but it'll be over next week." Like all in these sort of chipper one-liners. And some of it, to be honest, comes from I'm tired of talking about it with people.
Yeah.
And
No, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm tired of people being like, "Oh, have you tried this over the counter thing?" And I'm literally like, over the counter. I'm like over the
No.
counter, just so yes, I 100% do it to myself. It's true. And I guess the upside to that, at least, it's not that I love that. I think sometimes people may not take me seriously because of the way I do things, but it is my own business, and overall, I am much happier. Um, Things I'm still working on into my mid 40s is boundaries. I have
Yeah.
terrible boundaries. I say that all the time. I have awful boundaries.
Yeah.
Um, I have had moments where I've done really well with boundaries, but this is like a repeated unlearning. It's like generational unlearning.
It
Being,
is.
I don't need to, and there are things like I don't know why somebody in the world decided that like six figures means you're successful in the world. I'm like,
Exactly.
I don't know what that means.
But it's really hard. It's so seductive to just stick with that comfort zone, even though honestly, if we're trying to be authentic, it's actually not comfortable, but it's what we know. So the six figures or the title or the cool office or the cool car or the all of these things that we're told are the thing that we need to knock ourselves out for. And then at some point, I was the same way. I'm like, wait, what am I doing that for? Do I even care about that? Can I?
Well, I'll say too, m- it's, I imagine, still the case. We all have to learn these things for ourselves.
Yeah.
You
No, we
know,
will. Yep.
sometimes, and two, people don't often talk about whether you're watching a movie or whether like even for younger generations, seeing Instagram profile, like
Yeah.
people do not talk about what is actually happening behind all of that. And one of the things I kind of love, and I just started leaning into, um, on being a 40 something year old Instagrammer, content influencer basically, is you literally, for the first time in my life, and it is the most liberating thing. I mean, do I wish that I were thinner? Yes. Do I wish that like I wasn't getting wrinkly? Yes. You know, all of
Sure.
those. Sure. But I'm 1,000% happier. And I just don't care what anybody like. For the most part, I do not care anymore what people think of me. And I'm just like going to do my own thing and do what makes me happy. Even when I think some of my clients on the freelance side are a little bit stunned because I'm like, I'll wear my cat mom sweatshirt virtually to the meeting, you know? And they're like it's a store, everybody else is in the office. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, you don't have to hire me. You know, this is me. This is what I want to do. This is what you know, and going online, I really am like, don't care. And I think that's a massive advantage actually on
Yes.
what I have over some of the younger kids in that space, if you want, is that I really don't. And two, I've kind of learned to be a little more I almost have an aversion to, or I don't almost have, I have an aversion to very curated feeds.
Yeah. I call Instagram the three ring glitter circus because I don't really understand the whole vibe of it, and I try my best, but I agree with you. And I think it's another one of those things that I don't think people who are maybe in their 20s and even in their 30s really believe is true. But as you get into midlife and beyond, you really do have the liberation of you just don't care what people think because you've lived and lived so long and been around the block enough times. You've seen it all. You know that. And I'm sure we had a similar experience that even when you follow the rules, even when you're the good girl, even when you do everything right and take care of everybody else, you can still get kicked in the teeth. Stuff can still happen. So at what point do I stop wasting energy doing that and just do what I want to do? Because even if I have the same result, at least I was happy as I skipped down the path to the disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think started to learn that the space I really just want to lean into, you know, I actually do mentor sessions. Like sometimes I do speaking engagements and at
Yeah.
those they have mentor sessions. And I did one on brand and we had at an all women's conference and something that made me so I understand that I've struggled with a similar thing, not in the exact same situation, but there were a couple of women who had come up to me and had basically said, you know, I'm an empty nester or I'm a recent divorcee and I'm just starting on this. And we're talking about brand. And I think that some of the things that I imagined, I was like, oh, and I was just like, I'm just going to lean into it. You know, they said, I don't know who I am to even start to create my brand.
Yeah.
And I completely, like, I am empathetic to that. You know, I'm not in the same scenario, but I really decided to myself, I was like, you know, I'm a little strange. I like to do, you know, I don't have kids. I travel all over the world. I love my cats. You know, I love a good drink. I like offbeat things. I don't know, true crime documentaries, you know. Here are these things.
Yep.
And I don't care what anybody else thinks anymore. And I was like, I'm just gonna lean right into all of that. Like I am gonna just embrace it and make it mine and basically be like the female Anthony Bourdain. You know, like that is
Yeah.
I don't love, you know, I'm a little anti-establishment. I do. So
I
I'm
love
like,
that.
yeah, this is kind of like, it's not the persona. This is the real me, but this is sort of, I'm just going to do it. And my best advice to some of these women was if this is the space that you're in and you're feeling like you don't know, that is your brand.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
that is if you are grieving the loss of a life that you didn't, that and you're, you know, taking that on, that is your brand. And if you're on a platform of any kind, you know, whether you're writing or whether you're on social media or with any number of things, just say, like, own yourself and just say, this is where I'm at. And I know there are tons of people out there that are going through the exact same thing as me. And I'm going to tell you my perspective and what I'm doing in my life. Like, because that's what it is, you
That is.
know?
And isn't it interesting how when you do that, when you decide, okay, I'm just going to be vulnerable and put out who I am out there, and we stop hiding from each other and we stop glossing over everything,
I'm sure you see this when you speak. You look around the room and all of a sudden you're seeing aha moments of people going, oh, I thought I was the only one.
Yeah.
And they, but I think we're finally getting to a place where we're feeling more and more comfortable doing that. I think it's still scary for most of us to put a lot of our, what seems like not so pretty Instagram worthy stuff out there, but it's the real quirky, weird stuff about us. And we do have a tribe out there that's just waiting for someone to have just a tiny bit more courage than we do to start it. So it feels like there's this whole shift of consciousness happening in that area. If we can just all continue to tell our story so that people realize, oh, it's okay. I have no idea who the heck I am. It's okay that I don't know what I'm doing, or I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And because look, there's all these other people that feel the same way.
Well, and I kind of am of the mindset, all of us, like we're all at the age where we grew up with the whole idea of don't air your dirty laundry. Like
Right.
this is family on the outside, and this is what's happening on the inside.
Exactly.
And I kind of am very and there were no mental illnesses, and you
Right.
didn't about any of those things, so it is a transition, but this is the part where I'm like, I'm gonna own my latchkey kidness and just
Yeah.
like handle it myself,
Yeah.
like handle it myself and figure it out and it'll be fine, like no one dies, like it's fine, so
Yeah.
it just I and and I will say, I think another thing that I only recently started learning, which is really sad. And I think I don't think everyone did, but certainly I did. I grew up very much with the idea, or I was told by my mother very often, she was very much about appearances and what everyone called a museum house where people felt good white couches and
Ooh.
nobody wanted to touch anything because they were scared they were going to break things, that kind of everything was very proper. And she would say, like, would really almost encourage me. She would be like, I didn't have a lot of girlfriends growing up. And that's because other women were always like jealous of me. She always said that all the
Right.
time. And I kind of grew up in this mindset a little bit.
Yep.
And I would have a couple of really close girlfriends, but I didn't have a girls group. And truth be told, I wasn't much of a girls girl. Like I tended to like hang out with a lot of guy friends.
So did I. Yeah.
And it really wasn't until mid late 30s, I think, that I really started expanding that and like finding, and I've always been a feminist for as long as I can remember, but I, started finding all women communities that I'm like, oh man, I feel like this is what I've been missing for a lot. Like I had no idea. That was the other thing. I'm not going to be upset with myself because I just didn't know.
Yeah.
It really was not. I sort of stumbled upon it, and now I couldn't be happier that there really are communities of women who are all about uplifting one another, all about supporting. And it is not, because I think when you're in the corporate workplace with a lot of women, it is very cutthroat.
It is. It's very masculine energy. It's very much you must be that way, and so yeah, it's encouraged, and it's only. I agree with you. I was very well into my 30s, if not my 40s, before I thought I would maybe not break out in hives in a room full of women because I just had been conditioned that way, and then corporate certainly exacerbated that.
Yeah, I don't think I think corporate workplace is really difficult for women. And you kind of have the mindset that if somebody else wins, you're not going to win.
Right.
Like
If I win, someone must lose. If I have more, someone must have less. We have this either or mentality that's completely made up.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and it's, I think it's made up by, I mean, the men in society, but also the workplaces, right?
Totally.
I mean,
Yeah.
a little bit like talking about your salary, like why in the
Yeah.
world aren't we all talking about our salaries?
Yeah.
It's not for us that it's inappropriate. It doesn't benefit any of us to not talk about it. The
Yep.
only thing that it benefits, it's the company who most of the time is making money hand over fist. It's
Right.
not providing us. So I'm like, why does the standard even exist?
And that's the tip of the iceberg for all of the things thou shalt not bring into the workplace, like the fact that you have a life, that the fact that none of these things. It's very antiseptic. It's very, it's another one of those systems. There's a book, fantastic book called Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hersey. So she came up with I think it's called the NAP ministry. And she has this premise. It's related to capitalism, and racism and things like that. But she's talking about how we have this workplace, we have a society that's built around treating people like machines. So not like humans, right?
That's it.
So it's the
Human
grind culture. It's that you cannot rest. It's the you're the hero if you came into work on your deathbed. It's the I work all these hours and I pretend I don't have children with soccer games or, whatever it is. And so, yeah, I think that's exactly what happens is you kind of become dehumanized in an environment like that. And then so for women, and we start to look at each other as, it's an either or, and it's this competition and it's this grind and whatever. And when we step away from that and get into really plugged in communities of women where we realize, oh, I didn't have to do that at all. Because it's life changing.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was recently having a conversation about you had said something about the workplace. My brain already see this does happen in your 40s.
I know, like, wait, what was that? Why did I come in this room?
I just thought of something 2 seconds ago. I was talking about workplaces, a lot of workplaces that claim to be like family institutions or really how all the programs that they have, are, in my experience, I do not know if this is the same for everyone, but in my experience, those are actually the ones with the most toxic work environments.
Oh, yeah.
I worked when I was in agencies, like it was a boys club. A total boys club. And if you were a woman, you really were not going to survive unless you just had thick skin.
Yeah.
And strangely, I think I thrived in it only because I am a very outspoken, blunt person.
Yeah.
And, in a male environment, they take to that, like their men's communication style is much different than women's in the workplace,
Yeah.
And so I was a straight shooter, as they would say. And two, and this is many years ago, if somebody mentioned something about how good you look in your outfit, I would literally fire something back like, you don't look good in yours, and like I would just fire it right back at him. It wasn't, unfortunately, it wasn't really a time where it's like, I'm going to bring it up to HR. There was no HR. And then you would just get moved out, somehow, some way. And if you couldn't brush it off and just like fire something back, like equally insulting, like you weren't going to survive. It just, so in the next place I went was a woman owned, largely women ad agency who talked about like had won awards for being the best place to work, in this area, and we're woman owned. And it was mean girls central, mean bullies day in and day out. And I was like, wow. And I wasn't, part of the cool kids there. I was working so many more hours thinking it would get better if I just proved myself, but I just wasn't part of the cool kids.
Yeah.
The places that are like, we have really low morale. Let's go have a team happy hour after work. That's the other, like nobody, or have a family picnic for the whole company on the weekend. I'm like, nobody wants to go to those.
Oh, no.
Like, I don't know who in the workplace thinks that, like, you want, like, all of us want our life outside of work to be our life outside of work. Everybody in the workplace that is friends and wants to hang out with coworkers is already having happy hours together.
Yeah. They missed the boat.
But these are things that I'm really thankful. This is why I'm glad I don't work in the workplace anymore, because now, especially, I just want to say these things and point these things out. And I am sure that would not go over well.
No, you'd be in HR office all the time.
But everybody would be thinking it. Am I right?
We're all thinking it. I know. So what I want to know now is, so I've seen a lot, we've been in a lot of the same trenches. We've seen a lot of these same things. And so you've come out to this other place now where you are traveling and enjoying your life and doing the things you want to do. So what does that look like? Like, what does your life look like now when you look back on that? Like, what is the self-talk now that allows you to propel forward doing all of this cool stuff that you're doing?
Well, I tell myself all the time, once you leave the situation that you're in and you've given yourself actual time to sort of process all that. I'm talking like over a year and a half. I look back and I am like, I think I had like Stockholm syndrome thinking that all of this was okay. I'm like,
Right.
and I look back and I go, I can't believe some of the things I just put up with and never went to HR about, because there was always concerns about retaliation and blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah. But I can't believe I lasted in my last place of work as long as I did.
Oh,
I,
same. I often quote the Scarlet Letter. There's a quote in there that says, she didn't recognize the weight until she felt the freedom.
Oh, 1000. And I joke now that I have like PTSD from it because
Yeah.
the difference now, I'm like blown away at myself. And anytime anyone brings up that place of work, I'm like PTSD, I'm
Stop talking. Stop talking.
yeah. But I think a lot of it, I love the fact now that for the most part, things aren't perfect. Like I have X number of clients that I work X number of hours a week for. Most of the time I can work those hours whenever I want around whatever personal appointments that I have.
Yeah.
And it also took me a long time to say, I'm not working for your company on this day. I am working for you 3 days a week. Like these are my hours, and I'm not going to be taking emails there are some that slide in there, let's be honest.
Sure.
But really setting those boundaries. And now they're used to it and nobody thinks anything of it. Like now they will literally be like, oh, that's this day. Jordan's not in the office that day, in the office being virtual, but I had to really fight with myself, even.
Yeah.
Like if I'd have just said that to people, most of them probably would have been like, okay, there's no issue. I think I'm convincing myself. And
Right.
to watch my own business start to just really be on the up and up is I'm really excited. I think when I got my degree in art, I think people were like, an art degree.
Art degree. Yeah.
Parents always like, do what makes you happy. And then they were like, an art degree, and then so I think
Are you sure you wouldn't be happy with an accounting degree?
Yes.
That might be better happiness for you.
But I think they were shocked. I hit six figures with my art degree, doing design work, doing exactly what I set out to do. And now I'm finally starting to get to a place as a travel creator, which I'm sure sounds super silly to some of my peers. Like, oh my gosh, like she actually like quit her whole life to go be an influencer on Instagram. But now I'm getting to a place like I'm speaking, at conferences, large conferences. I was featured in Photos recently.
Amazing.
Things are really starting to, I'm getting paid to travel, not just comp trips. I'm, starting to get, everything paid for, including my flights, and then paid. Like things are starting to happen. So if anything, at least I think my hard-nosed military dad, instilled in me is to keep going, like that level of perseverance. If you think, just as an example, in any field, but certainly in Instagram, people are like, oh, I just started in Instagram, and then you don't really get any traction after a year. Well, no kidding. Well, and I think too, being older, we're talking about like what we would tell ourselves back then.
Yeah.
When you spend a lot of time being envious and like, why not me? What is this person? I'm working so hard. I don't understand. And the truth of the matter is some people just make different decisions, and yes, it lands them at a good place. Some people make all the right decisions and it just doesn't come together for them. And some get really lucky. Like that's just,
yeah.
And most of us are not really lucky. We're not really wealthy, and I think most of us look at the sort of chosen few that, won the lottery and are like, why can't my life?
Right.
People don't win the lottery,
No.
Like just not dwelling on it. Like,
move on.
Yeah.
What is the best part for you now that you're more in this authentic state? What is the best part about what you're doing now, midlife, all of those things? What's the best part?
Well, the travel is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I've always been obsessed with travel for as long as I can remember. And now I get to lean in all the way to that too. I never do anything half-assed. It's like 100 all the way, like,
right.
And I think the freedom too, making decisions for my business and having a team where I can shape the culture into something that I want it to be and not what I'm forced into. And I don't want my team to be unhappy either. That's the thing, is I want to have fun with my team. Like I very much want to have a work hard, play hard kind of team. Like, it's also all female. That's the other.
Woohoo!
Yeah, it's all women. And I just want us to have fun, and we're all freelancers, and we're all, if somebody isn't feeling well, or if somebody has another client they have to work on, like, good, go do it. Like you log on at a time that's comfortable for you, and I will get back to you when I'm logged on, So
Yeah.
I like having those sort of like putting my own boundaries in place for what work looks like for other, for myself and other people too.
Then it's working.
Yeah, I think
I mean,
so.
how great is that?
I hope so. Nobody's told me that it's not. So
And the only voice that matters is your own. So who cares?
I tend to have when you have a two, like, admittedly, I tend to have a very dominant personality. So sometimes folks have a hard time. Like if they disagreed with me, they would have a hard time within themselves saying something to me. Not that I would receive
Right.
support, but
Right. If you had a megaphone and could just the journey that you've taken after, becoming an adult and now doing what you're doing now, if you had a megaphone and could just say something, one thing or a couple things to the people walking along behind you so that they could maybe save themselves some aggravation, what would that be?
my megaphone is my mouth. I would literally say, do it, go for it. I understand not everybody has the luxury of, not having health insurance, or, taking a pay cut on a salary. But I would say, if you are just miserable at your job, take a pay cut. Like, it's okay, take a little bit of a pay cut. It is not, um, a deduction of points on you as a person and on what you've accomplished in your life. And I think a lot of folks really are hesitant about it because they're like, what about this? What about that? What about this? Well, you'll never know what your life could be like unless you go do it. And there are what ifs all the time. So, it's a bit like, I'm with a lot of politics, for example, people are like, nope, that's not going to happen because this would happen. And a lot of times I'm like, we'll never know because it's never actually been that way. So
we made that up.
Yeah, you can decide not to move or make a plan or anything. And I'm more of the mindset of, like, just do it. Do anything. Do make one small change, and any of them. It doesn't have to be, I don't know, selling all of your things and moving across the world,
Right. Exactly.
It doesn't have to be like that, but just do something, anything.
Oh,
And you
I love
have
that.
to do it. You cannot guarantee. I mean, honestly, God, you cannot guarantee that. I went into that 6-figure job thinking this is going to be the greatest thing on earth. And you know what? I came home absolutely hysterical 3 weeks later. So,
Same.
what wasn't the greatest thing is that 6-figure job. What's way better is doing what I'm doing now. And I wouldn't know that unless I was like, I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Yeah. I hope people are hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we support you now? Like, what could we be doing for you?
Oh, well, you can definitely support me by following my Facebook group.
We're going to put links in all the show notes of all your stuff. So you've got your Instagram, your blog.
I've got my blog, globaldebauchery.com. Those are all great. I have speaking sessions, from time to time at a lot of different conferences. So if you attend any of these travel conferences, by all means, stop by, say hi. If you see something of mine that inspires you, share it. And don't be afraid to just reach out directly via DM or email. Like, I am very responsive. So I'm here too. I appreciate the support, but I'm also here to support others as well.
Yeah,
so
that's
in
fantastic.
their journey to do exactly what I've, been doing and still struggle with from time to time.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, we all do. And it really, it's that journey that really has no destination. We just keep going to the next iteration, right?
Yeah. I'm good with it. I'm good. I'm okay.
Me too.
So.
Exactly. That's what keeps it interesting, right?
Yeah.
Any big travel plans coming up?
I do have a lot. I probably overloaded myself as I do because I have
Mhm.
boundaries.
That's your
Uh,
brand.
it's a little bit, yeah. I mean, I just openly admit it. Like it's just, it's who I am. There are things that you try to change forever and ever, and then there are things that you start going, you know what, I'm human and this is just it, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry. But so I'm actually attending TravelCon in Portland, and
Nice.
right after that, I'm attending TBEX in Spain, and I'm also going to be speaking at Camp Indie, which is a
Hooray!
summer camp for remote workers in Connecticut. So all of that is going to be amazing. Can't wait. That's
Fantastic.
all by mid-June.
And that leaves you just the luxurious rest of the year to do many
Yep.
more amazing things. I'm
Yep.
very excited to see you at Camp Indie in Connecticut in June. We'll put a link to that as well. Really great place. Like that's where we met, certainly. So it's another one of those examples of when you put yourself in the right group of people that are supportive and have a mindset like you can do just incredible things. So,
Well, let me put out there just before we go as well.
yeah.
I'm launching these courses. One of them is about
Yeah,
branding, one of them is about marketing yourself, and one is about building websites. And this is applicable to small business owners, entrepreneurs, freelancers, anybody. I am happy to give the community a $50 off discount specific just
fantastic.
for you guys, just for your listeners. Launch date is June 3rd. And so
Woohoo!
yeah,
Awesome.
I'll provide that as well. And if you guys want to make a move and you have questions about any of this stuff and you want to go your own route in life, and just give up what you're doing, like I need a website, these are the resources for you.
Get a girl. Perfect. Jordan, thank you so much. I'm so happy you're able to be here. It's been awesome. I love to hear people's journeys and to realize just how many of the same challenges we all face once we stop hiding from each other.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun. And in my circles, I don't really get to see, I don't really run into a whole lot of people like in my own mindset. So my own
It's so cool when you do though, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to A Brave Journey. I'm so happy we're here. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and leave a review and share this with a friend who could benefit too. See you next time.